Joining us live in studios, Fiso Mahlangu, Group Political Editor, Adil Nchabeleng, Transform RSA President, and we have Kim Heller, who is a political commentator and analyst. Good evening to you, and thanks so much for joining us. It is still Women's Month, so we'll go with the ladies first. Just looking at the position or the strategy of Minister Lindiwe Sisulu now calling for President Jacob Zuma to be disciplined. What do you make of this? Is this a political masterstroke or something that could backfire?
Thank you, Cindy. Well, I think we must expect the next few months to be a real battlefield for the ANC. Hopefully, there's not much bloodshed. And I think this is in part because we have leaders of the organization who are in a dichotomy between being the caretakers of the organization and at the same time standing for political office. So I think what we've seen with her is that she's postulating in terms of her potential political positioning. And I think it's unfortunate that she's come out with a very strong anti-Zuma war cry, because that is not necessarily the voice of branches who she should be representing. Neither is it the body of a very sound political ideological campaign. I would rather have seen her speaking more about her views on radical economic transformation, the programs and plans she has to reinforce that and deal with real issues in the country like poverty and inequality. But she's been quite quiet on that. And the war cry, the continual war cry against the president, I think is not positioning these candidates very strongly at all.
Yeah. So your view with Lindiwe Sisulu now going toe-to-toe, as it were, with President Zuma, of course, joining by her utterances the anti-Zuma camp.
Well, I think, Cindy, political football teaches you that if you want to score, you've got to play the game. But before the 18 line, you've got to play the man. And I think she's learned that very well. This is the game of politics and the gloves are off. And she's really playing the man. And she's not playing Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma or Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa in this case. I considered some weeks back that Ms. Sisulu may not be a presidential contender, but she may be a fast contender in the sense that perhaps she's designed, put there, to break the female vote. If she can destabilize some of the branches and some of the wards that ideally follow Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, and people realize and think, oh, well, there's another woman in the frame, that will take Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma out of the presidential campaign or out of the top two. So perhaps Masisulu's put there not because she thinks she can be the president, but simply to destabilize a female voter. Not considering that all women are going to vote for women anyway, but at this point she's not playing the ball, she's playing the man, because in this country, in order to get some sort of media presence and media credibility, you've got to speak against President Jacob Zuma, the Gupta family, you've got to drop some slurs on state capture, and that's exactly what she's doing. However, because the media does not vote in the December conference, and all the darlings of feminism and patriarchy also don't vote, it will be the branches of the ANC. What I think she should do in her campaign is to appeal to the voter and tell the voter what she intends to do when she becomes president. But you see, she does not do that. She plays the game and she plays the man. And I think it will be a letdown. However, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, speaking everywhere, addresses the fact of radical economic transformation, the issue of free education, the issue of roads and healthcare. And I think that's what people need to learn. So my earnest view is not that Masisulu considers that she's a presidential contender. I think she's ideally put there to break the female vote so that if it distances itself from NDZ, it can possibly fall to CR17.
You think that's the strategy, Adil, or you think that maybe there are many more others who are calling for discipline within the NEC? We've seen Derek Hanekom coming out and even Bigitele very recently speaking about the Guptas, giving the government freedom to reign or rather to govern. So in your view, is there resonance of what Madam Sisulu is calling for?
I think what Madam Sisulu's call is actually a good, it's a very weak start to what could have been a great campaign. You cannot start a campaign with taking a personal attack at your own top leader within your own structures politically. One, it's a very bad start to what could have been a good campaign. Second part of it is within the ANC, there is now a culture whereby dissident voices who are not necessarily competent to stand independently are using various ways of gaining public circle of attention by actually attacking the head of their own organization, in this case being Zuma. And it's something that should actually be reckoned. Remember, we are not even 7 days out of what was a monumental motion of no confidence campaign, as well as a failed motion of no confidence. Within the 7 days, you've had so much of voices coming up, and not much has been done in terms of even disciplining the people, by the way, who have actually been extremely vocal, who have been actually, dissident, and who have been going against the party's line. So it's quite strange to find candidates that are supposed to be unifying towards building a brand that is strong, starting to work against themselves and actually building upon each other.
How different is what Lindiwe Sisulu had said to other members whom one can say are in the same WhatsApp group, in calling for President Zuma to fall and in saying that he's become a liability to the party, he's liquidating the ANC. How different is this, Kim, in your view?
Well, first of all, I think they're trying to distract from the real issues, which is the disciplining of dissident members right now. And as far as those are concerned, this reactionary conduct by members within the party should not be tolerated. And I think that must go ahead, and disciplinary measures need to be taken. I mean, carrying on the football analogy, if Kaizer Chiefs team or a member of the team scored a goal for Orlando Pirates, I do not think that Steve would keep that person on the field. And I think the president must take action. So I think these calls by these dissidents is actually just distracting from that issue. And I think I'd like to make a point about these people defining themselves as the moral compass of the ANC and as conscious activists. Because conscious activists do not vote with reactionary opposition forces against their own party. Neither do they march in hand virtually with former oppressors on the streets of South Africa, when this is not the sentiment of branches. And what I'm very worried about in the next few months is that the sentiments of these people, rather than the voice of the branches, will not be heard. And I think we must remember that the ANC ethos is that the branch is king, the voice of the branch is king, and that we must not lose sight of that critical voice. Those are the voices of the real people we must worry about in the next few months.
Yeah, so other patterns that we've seen in recent months, especially post the local government elections, indicative of a sense of entitlement, if you will, of the ANC political royalty, as it were, that they're altruistic above the party, etc. In your views, Fiso?
I think there is a ritual that concedes itself to the ANC. When you think about the ANC tradition and culture, the ANC has got a phase that considers seniority, and that's perhaps why the challenges in the ANC exist today. Because, former President Thabo Mbeki was there, President Jacob Zuma, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, and Mandela had to decide. And some people got hurt at his decision because there are sort of seniority rights or beliefs to say, well, I did this in CODESA, or I played this role in the government of national unity, and for that matter, I believe that I should be made an elect member of the party at this point. So there is a significant amount of seniority that exists in this party. But I believe if anybody is fair to themselves, and Mr. Matthew Posa considers how many branches have nominated him, Masisulu considers how many branches have nominated her, and in the ANC structures, if you fill a hall of 2,000 people, in a charismatic church matter, we think you've got a large following. In a presidential campaign, you are 0.2%. So I think I would be very embarrassed to want to go into an elective conference and put my name up for the presidential match with only 5 wards behind me or 3 branches behind me. But I think there is another analogy. There is another political game at play. And I think South Africans should be awakened to that. It's not that these people actually believe that they are rightful contenders. There is another game that's being played here. And the many dice that are being thrown, who knows that in the latter day, perhaps to us as media officers, we're being told that, hey, Matthew Posa is in the game and Masisulu is in the game. And in the last day of the elective conference, all these people form one slate together and they overpower another. So I think as analysts, we must also be very conscious of the fact that politics can be very devious and it is a game that is manipulated. And often people play for the gallery. So sometimes I see what Masisulu is doing and I think the game is on, because people cannot really attempt to represent themselves as presidential materials with less than 500 wards in the ANC elective conference.
Yeah, would you deny that, though, that is the pink elephant in the room, that of state capture within the ANC? We've seen many leaders speak about it, and I think Masisulu was also one of those that said all the ministers who are implicated or somehow are in the leaked emails and linked to Gupta family affairs.
Then she denied it when you asked her that question at the policy conference and said that was not what she said, but she had put it on record.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm saying, but it's clearly an issue within the party. Do they have the capacity, the appetite to even investigate a larger scope of state capture?
I think the issue of state capture is a white elephant, and it goes back to white monopoly capital, because the aspect of state capture has nothing to do with regards to how the levers of state, which is here the judiciary, the legislative and the executive, has actually been defined. Here we're talking about people who are trying to trump up something that is the deadbeat. The Zuma-Gupta slogans are going to die very serious death, because in 4 months, Zuma will not be the president of South Africa. What are we then going to hold on to?
Of the ANC, unless you're saying that he might be recalled. What do you know?
In terms of the, president of the ANC in 4 months, okay? He's moving out of the ANC. He will stay on as a president of South Africa until the party goes into national elections. But if you're continuing to use that deadbeat slogan of saying that the problems we have in South Africa are Zuma and Gupta related, you are insulting our intelligence as South Africans, because we know fundamentally that the economic aspect of South Africa has nothing to do with these two individual families and have nothing to do with the aspect of the so-called state capture report as it was released by Advocate Thuli Madonsela. The aspect of that state capture report was an aspect of a purging campaign, which was intended at causing a rift and an unnecessary tension within the political power and play. Secondly, if that particular commission which was agreed upon, that it must go into evaluating what state capture in South Africa means, you will be shocked what will come out in South African information as to who are the real players of power in South Africa's economy. We're talking about treasury, we're talking about the levers of government, we're talking about the decision making as well. So the aspect of Zuma-Gupta debate must just die a natural death. We are tired as South Africans. We want to move to a new trajectory of talking where politicians can start talking as interesting things. What is interesting for us as a development here, I would have loved to see a Zuma-Sisulu alliance campaign emerging. This is not happening because they are too focused on individual personalities rather than working towards the formation of a strong alliance that will take the ANC going forward and
you mean NDZ and Sisulu?
Correct.
But here's my political analysis, which I think this is a bigger game. Many people in the ANC alliance said there is tradition within the party. Masisulu has never been the deputy president of the party, but she's campaigning for presidency. Why doesn't anyone stop her and say, hey, we've got ANC tradition? And according to ANC tradition, the deputy president must succeed the president. They are letting her continue because they know it's part of a greater strategy. If for all intents and purposes, COSATU and the SACP believed that ANC tradition in fact existed, they would shut down everyone else who is trying to campaign or try and discredit them. So the campaign rhetoric doesn't continue. But no one is saying anything. Everyone is oblivious to the fact that September hasn't even come, but people are fully campaigning because it is part of a larger game. But if someone in what we consider the Zuma camp was campaigning, everyone has a thing to say about it.
Yeah.
So if this idea of tradition and culture really exists in the ANC, why is COSATU and the SACP quiet on Masisulu's campaign?
Yeah, and interestingly as well, as you say, it's unprecedented that we've seen so many presidential hopefuls coming forward, even the least obscure or rather the unlikely ones that are coming forward in your view, Kim, with Masisulu calling for disciplinary against Jacob Zuma. That in itself has never been done in the party. We've seen a lot of firsts with President Jacob Zuma's administration. What do you make out of this call, considering that the NEC would have to discipline the president? And I don't even know if they would want to take that up or whether it's just another sloganeering or electioneering ploy.
On the issue of state capture, it is a very serious issue and we must deal with that decisively and exhaustively. However, it goes well beyond President Zuma and the current administration. And I think that is what people don't want to see. So, for instance, the lion's share of corruption in this country happens in the corporate sector, and we don't hear about that, and the media hide it. So I think we need an exhaustive investigation of that, which is sanctioned by everyone in Parliament. But they're not going to do that because it's going to expose, as one of the guests said, patterns that we don't want to show in this economy. As far as President Zuma is concerned, if he's guilty, he must, like any other citizen of this country, stand in front of a court, and he must be charged accordingly. I think what's happening, and it's I think actually quite disrespectful. Once again, I always go back to the ANC branches, but they have to be at the forefront of the electoral conference, and as they should be. And I think what is happening is that the voice of the branches aren't being heard. What we're seeing rather is a spate of personal insults being directed by leaders of the same party, and that's very unfortunate. Interestingly, in that context, I don't think I've ever heard the president resort to personal attacks or attack on any of his comrades. And I think that shows that he's actually putting the party first, and before that, of personal interests.
I mean, we often see them sharing a stage, cutting a ribbon, some ceremonial process, handshake, etc., and then these kind of things come up, and you wonder to yourself, but what's the point of it all? Who's being misled?
The advisors of these candidates are really mischievous. If you were to look at the campaign, the most powerful people in the campaign are advisors, because they theme out the message of every particular campaign. And in this case, we should start looking at really having ANC start supporting. ANC members, ANC branches, ANC structures start supporting their own candidates and giving them, if a branch is actually delegating a person into a position of power, they should be able to write actually the script out to say this should be the way in which you're going to represent our views when you're actually standing. In this case, it is not happening. We hear of individuals being given a delegation authority to say stand for a position, but then it ends there. There's no continuity in terms of engagement with the branches. Then the individuals runs on their own. We have more than 4, by the way, presidential candidates right now. We have Jeff Kadebe's campaign, which is starting off, which we will be very interested to see how the alignment of that particular campaign takes and in what shape and form it will start talking to the realities. So far, in our evaluation as Transform RSA, there has not been any strong candidate coming up except for Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma articulating the issues of radical economic transformation. And in the last 2 weeks, speech that we went to, one of the speeches, she elaborated so eloquently as to how she sees radical economic transformation unfold, including the issues of skills, including the issues of economic development, including the issues of industrialization, including the issues of infrastructure. So it is that kind of a dialogue and a debate that we want to enter into. Don't take us into this spiteful sort of, debates where people are gossiping about each other and trying to cause unnecessary tensions within the structures of the movement. This is a campaign to win the hearts of South Africans, not to spite each other within the movement.
Yeah, but I mean, you hear, of course, that the Gupta email leaks, for example, had implicated some people who either led to their resignation or falling on their sword, as it were, KPMG, South Africa CEO, as a case in point. So if people put all of those, connecting the dots, to use that very loosely utilized phrase, and they feel that Jacob Zuma indeed needs to be disciplined within the ANC based on all these allegations and things that you can attach to him. Is that not legitimate in your view? I'll come to you, Kim, with that.
I think it's amazing to me how someone is fired from one post as police commissioner, then comes back as the deputy to agriculture, and South Africa doesn't question why. And then, one day in August, the same individual takes a microphone and says, we understand that the Guptas have CVs of certain individuals. Why has this country become Guptarized, and has a whole lecture and an insulting rhetoric on everyone and everything without facts? I think South Africans can be really oblivious and blind to things that they wish to ignore, and starry-eyed to things that they want to come out into the public domain. And I think when you deal with any political party, you expect there to be decisions, you expect there to be secrets. But I think what exists now is that when we're united in the ANC, we're all ANC, God for us all. But when we come out of those struggle songs, it's every man and every woman for himself. But there is a culture that every 5 years and every 10 years, the SACP and COSATU stretches its arms, and there's malice within the parties. Friends become foes, and foes become friends. And after the elective conference, everything soothes down, and the party sort of reconciles. The danger in that is that one day the ANC may be so stripped and broken that it will not be able to reconcile itself. But it is an event that every 5 years and 10 years, these struggles continues. And I give you one example. If you remember in Polokwane, the same sentiments and statements being made on the public domain now by Mr. Blade Nzimande are not new. He made them to President and about former President Thabo Mbeki, and it comes again. So right now, Mr. Ramaphosa is the it of the town. And should he win after serving 5 years or 10 years, the whole rhetoric will come. So it's about whose bread is buttered on which side. So every 5 years, I think the ANC has this indictment and sort of tries to purge itself from within, and it's a very dangerous game. But after the elective conference, it then reunites because people need jobs, and it comes back and it says, let us work. I think the only person who can deny the ANC its rights is the ANC. And if the ANC is going to die being the monster that defeated apartheid, it's not the enemy outside. It will have to be the enemy within. So the only thing that can destroy the ANC has to be the ANC.
Are these the unpatriotic elite, or those that have or feel that they have the ANC pedigree above everybody else? I mean, I just want to come back to the question of applying discipline processes within the party fairly and equitably. That was one of the questions, that it's not the case. Kim?
Before you continue, it may be the elite. It may also be the parasitic bourgeoisies, that exist. I think the struggle is won to this day by two types of individuals. Those who believe they have a sense of entitlement to say, I've been here long enough, and I will not be underplayed or beaten by a traditionalist or an uneducated man or a polygamist and XYZ. And there's the bourgeoisies who think, well, I studied this and I've got this, and this is a game I can play. And when someone else
and I didn't join the struggle to go hungry.
And I didn't join the struggle to go hungry. And you think because you're an elite in your own house, and you hear of a man like Mosebenzi Zwane appointed as Minister of Mineral Resources, and you're like, yenzeke njani land, So I think there's that parasitic bourgeoism that exists even within the party. Perhaps the vetting process to join any political party should be put yourself on the floor and take the party flag and run with it. However, it is a game run by individuals with personal agendas and beliefs, hopes and aspirations.
Yeah, just on the question of discipline processes being applied fairly in the party, as raised by Madam Sisulu.
Well, on the issue of discipline, I think at the fore of this is discipline of the MPs who voted against President Zuma in favor of the opposition parties. And I think it is imperative that they are disciplined, because they're splitting the party. This is quite a depressing conversation, actually, because if these candidates for the presidency would show just a fraction of the consideration towards RET and land return as they do to insulting the president, I think they would have stronger campaigns. I think it's a time for very decisive leadership with great integrity that puts the people first, and the wishes of the branches first. And I'm really hoping that takes prime position in the next few months. I'm not sure it's going to.
Yeah. But you think on Madam Sisulu's campaign that this is a shot in the dark?
Look, it is, as I said to you, it's a really bad start to a good campaign, what could have been a good campaign. But I hope it will improve over time, and she will start actually focusing on the issues that the voters, the constituents on the ground wants to listen to. People are tired of hearing about squabbles as well as gossips of internal politics, and looking at the solution to improving South Africa and having transformation being the core thrust of what South Africans. 80% people are poor and want jobs and opportunities.
All right, we're going to leave it there. As always, our esteemed panelists, much appreciated. Mbogodo, Malibongwe, Igama lamakhosikazi, avumuhle dollar.
And welcome to Manyi TV.
Manyi TV.
We've gone black, ladies and gentlemen.
Those are private jokes, but thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Kim Heller is political commentator joining us in studio. Sfiso Mahlangu, group political editor, and Adil Nchabeleng, Transform RSA president. You at home, we thank you for your viewership. We'll be back after this.